The Canadian flag flew at half-mast over Parliament Hill, a somber symbol of a nation in mourning. 4 dual Canadian-Chinese citizens were executed in China. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau expressed profound sadness. Foreign Minister Melanie Joly condemned the executions. The families of the executed pleaded for privacy. The execution sent shockwaves through Canada. The Chinese government remained resolute. Beijing does not recognize dual citizenship. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs asserted due process. China emphasized the dangers of drug trafficking. The embassy in Ottawa reiterated China's rule of law. The chasm between the two legal systems was highlighted. The executions unfolded against a backdrop of already strained relations between Canada and China, a relationship increasingly defined by mistrust, suspicion, and diplomatic standoffs. The seeds of discord were sown with the 2018 arrest of Meng Wanzhou, a top executive at Huawei in Vancouver. Meng's arrest at the behest of the U.S. on charges of violating sanctions against Iran triggered a furious response from Beijing. China retaliated with the detention of 2 Canadians, Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, on charges of espionage. The 2 Michaels were held for over 1,000 days, subjected to harsh interrogations and solitary confinement. The Meng Wanzhou saga and the detention of the 2 Michaels cast a long shadow over Canada-China relations. Efforts to secure their release dominated Canadian foreign policy, with Prime Minister Trudeau calling for their immediate release. News of the executions reverberated around the world, drawing condemnation from governments and human rights organizations alike. Amnesty International denounced the executions as shocking and inhumane. The organization criticized the lack of transparency in the legal proceedings. Human Rights Watch accused the Chinese government of using the death penalty as political repression. The international community was urged to pressure China to abolish the death penalty. The United States expressed deep concern. The European Union called on China to respect international law. The international outcry had little impact on Beijing. The Chinese government remained defiant. The executions highlighted the challenges of engaging with a rising China. The arrest of Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou in Canada triggered a diplomatic crisis. Her 2021 release raised hopes of a thaw in Canada-China relations. But the executions of 4 dual citizens dashed those hopes. Analysts saw this as a sign of China's growing assertiveness. The executions of 4 dual citizens spotlight other Canadians detained in China. Over 100 Canadians are in Chinese prisons on disputed charges. Robert Schellenberg was sentenced to death for drug smuggling. His sentence increased after Meng Wanzhou's arrest. Hussein Salil, a Canadian Uyghur, was sentenced to life in prison. His trial lacked due process. These cases highlight the risks for foreigners in China. China's war on drugs imposes some of the harshest drug laws, often resorting to the death penalty. Critics argue the laws are overly harsh and target marginalized communities. The government defends its stance as necessary for public health and stability. The executions of the 4 dual citizens sent shockwaves through the international community, setting a chilling precedent for the treatment of foreign nationals in an increasingly assertive China. The case raised profound questions about the limits of diplomacy and the future of relations between China and the West. The executions highlighted the growing chasm between China's legal system and those of many Western countries. China's refusal to recognize dual citizenship and its opaque legal proceedings stood in stark contrast to the legal norms upheld by many Western democracies. The case underscored the challenges of engaging with a rising China, increasingly confident on the world stage. Under President Xi Jinping, China has adopted a more assertive foreign policy, prioritizing national interests. The execution served as a reminder that China's rule of law is often subordinate to the Communist Party. The case highlighted the risks faced by foreigners in China, especially those challenging the government's authority. The executions of the 4 dual citizens left a legacy of grief, anger, and uncertainty. The families of the executed were left to mourn their loved ones, their grief compounded by the distance, the political complexities surrounding the case, and the lack of closure. The Canadian government faced the daunting task of seeking justice while maintaining diplomatic relations with a global superpower. The international community, shaken by the executions, grappled with how to engage with a rising China. A country increasingly willing to flout international norms, the executions were a stark reminder of the fragility of human rights. In an interconnected world, the case was a call to action for justice, accountability, and dialogue. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for the latest news.